Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. On this episode, what I want to talk about is Shedeur Sanders and Deion Sanders. You guys know it's rare that I do current events, but this one I think has garnered a lot of attention, and I couldn't move past the needle to not talk about it. You don't necessarily have to be a football fan to understand the dynamics that's going on here. If you're not familiar, Shedeur Sanders is the youngest son of Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders, obviously one of the greatest athletes that we've ever seen in our lifetime. He's a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You could make a case that not only being a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but Deion Sanders is arguably one of the greatest football players ever. Definitely I don't even think it's an argument that he's the greatest defensive back ever. With that being said, Deion has carved out a beautiful lane for himself, obviously post-retirement, going into television, and while also doubling as a little league coach, then a high school coach, and now a college football coach. And Deion Sanders is one of the most energetic and engaging personalities that you would ever want to be around. They call him Prime Time for a reason, or you can call him Coach Prime now. And you guys, if you followed, I've actually done a couple of episodes about Deion on this podcast. Huge fan of Deion Sanders, always have, always will be. Except for when we played against him when he was coaching at Jackson State. I was not a fan for a couple of hours as we proceeded to throw Jackson State, his team, down a flight of stairs, and my South Carolina State University Bulldogs won the Black College National Championship in 2021. That's beside the point. Deion has managed to, like I said, carve a great path for himself and subsequently for his kids. And as I mentioned, his youngest son, Shedeur, is a quarterback extraordinaire, a very good quarterback coming out of high school, where he had signed to play at the University of South Florida. Never made it to South Florida because subsequently Deion took the head coaching job at the aforementioned Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi, which is an HBCU. Shedeur went there, quarterbacked the team to 2 national title games, didn't win either one, but played in both championship games against South Carolina State as well as North Carolina Central. Before his dad took the head coaching job at the University of Colorado, Shedeur subsequently followed him, as well as his brother Shiloh, who plays safety. And Shedeur went on to have a very good junior year and an even better senior year of football. I think he led the nation in completion percentage. He threw for over 4,000 yards, a bunch of touchdowns. He was highly regarded as one of the best quarterbacks coming out into this year's draft. If you're not familiar, the NFL draft was held a couple of weeks ago at the time of this recording. Shedeur Sanders, much to the surprise of many, was not drafted in the first round. However, he was drafted, but albeit in the 5th round. And there was a lot of talk about why someone who was projected to be arguably the best quarterback in the draft fall to the 5th round. That normally doesn't happen in the NFL. If you're a top pick, you usually get picked at the top. But I wanted to title this episode Shedeur Sanders versus Deion Sanders because I think somewhere along the lines, we, the viewing public, may have conflicted the two people. Deion clearly is one of a kind. Like, you can honestly say that there is only one Deion Sanders There will never be another Deion Sanders. There'll never be another talent like Deion Sanders. And while there may be some that may come with the type of talent that Deion had, there won't be any that will have the personality to match and to back it up, if you will. And so even in saying that, when you look at Shedeur, while he's a very talented young man, very well spoken, very mild mannered, off the football field, very competitive, on the football field, very talented. He does not have his daddy's charisma and swag, if you will. And to be fair to him, no one does. But I think maybe, just maybe, in the discussion as to why Shedeur fell to the 5th round, we may be confusing the two people. And I think it's easy to understand how that happened, but I don't know necessarily that we have done that. So I want to kind of take a look at it from that angle. By all accounts, coming out of Colorado, Shedeur was, for what it's worth, predicted from the quote-unquote experts that I call the suits. The suits said that at the very least, he was the 2nd best quarterback. And many of the mock drafts, if you follow mock drafts, I don't, but I did see quite a few of them. If you follow mock drafts, most mock drafts had Shedeur being drafted as high as number 1. Some had him drafted at number 3, no later than number 21. Now, before we get into where he got drafted and everything, I want to go back for a second and explain something to you. Okay, this particular quarterback draft was not a deep draft, right? I can make the case that the 2024 NFL draft was way deeper with quarterbacks. And while the number 1 pick in this year's draft was Cam Ward from Miami, if you take Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, and I think if you put them in last year's 2024 draft, I don't think Cam Ward, who was the number 1 pick, I don't think he gets picked until maybe the 3rd round. And I would say the same for Shedeur. And again, that's no knock on who they are as people or who they are as players. I just don't know that they were as talented as the picks that were taken last year. And you can't help when you were born, right? And it's the NFL. Everybody gets a chance to prove themselves. And so even saying that in a weekend draft, I think they both, stood to benefit from being drafted high, considering that there weren't a lot of quarterbacks in the draft. Also, one of the things I think we lost sight of is the fact that there wasn't really a lot of need for quarterbacks, not early. Because here's the thing, if you draft a quarterback, generally speaking, in the 1st round, you expect that quarterback at some point, sooner than later, to become your starting quarterback for the season. Preferably the season that you're in, because in the NFL, it is a what have you done for me lately league. It is a win now, win now, win now. Coaches don't have 5 or 6 years to develop a team. You've, generally speaking, depending on who you are, have about 3 years. And depending for some, what color you are, you might have 1 year. And while that may be a harsh reality, it is reality. Check the stats. There have been black coaches that have not made it a full NFL season. So it kind of is what it is. With that being said, there was a lot of talk and a lot of stuff happening around the draft. What I would say to the people who follow the draft or who follow college football, because here's the thing, I will admit this, there was a lot of discussion about Shedeur Sanders falling to the 5th round. And there was a lot of discussion about Shedeur Sanders falling to the 5th round by a lot of people who don't watch college football. Period. You could look at Shedeur Sanders and I could honestly tell you that he is, in my opinion, in this year's draft, a 1st round pick. I don't think that's any question. So as I watched the draft, I could only help but wonder why he fell to the 5th round. We may never know. But as it was happening, and I tweeted this out on Twitter, I said, I don't think he's going to get drafted, and I'm not sure why, because I really wasn't. So I was relieved to see that he was finally taken in the 5th round at the 144th pick by the Cleveland Browns. That being said, it led me to wonder openly, just like everybody else, why did it take so long? And why did he fall so far? And there may be a couple of reasons for that. And I'm not here to defend the NFL. I'm not here to, second guess anything. I'm just going to give you my thoughts. I think beyond a shadow of a doubt in this year's draft, he's a first round pick. I think he has first round talent. I think you could make the case, and some teams probably could have made the case, that Shedeur Sanders could have been the second quarterback to come off the board. So if Cam Ward gets drafted at number 1, Shedeur Sanders was probably not going to be drafted number 2 because the team that was picking second didn't need a quarterback. But they did need the third team that was picking was the New York Giants, my favorite team, did need a quarterback for the future. So in saying that, it was very surprising that Shedeur Sanders fell as far as he did. And again, I'm not going to make any excuses, but I want to kind of, pick your brain and make you think about this a little bit, because we saw so much. I mean, I saw everything from memes saying this is what happens when a black father steps in and, controls everything, and white man trying to keep him down. And I'm not saying that that's not true. That I don't have a great answer for that. That could possibly be true. There was talk that the league was colluding to keep Shedeur Sanders out of the league, to humble him, to teach him a lesson. I don't necessarily know that that's true, and that could very well be true. I didn't go to the owners' meeting. Who knows what they said in that meeting? And that meeting was held before the draft. They could have passed a little note around, hey, let's make Shedeur wait. I don't know that. And I don't have a great answer for if it did or didn't happen. Is it possible? Yeah, it could have happened. I don't necessarily know that it did, but it could have. I'm not in a position to say that it didn't, right? So here's the thing. If you go back, when the season ended, when the college football season ended, I think most experts, most suits had Shedeur Sanders as the second best quarterback. And given the fact that Tennessee, who was drafting first, had almost all but decided that Cam Ward was going to be their guy, Cam Ward was pretty much off the board, right? So it was on the New York Giants and the subsequent teams after that who may need a quarterback. Well, the New York Giants, again, had the third pick, and they were in a situation where they were needing a quarterback. Given the fact that the New York Giants had they had 2 free agent quarterbacks, right? That they signed, Russell Wilson as well as Jameis Winston. So you got these 2 vets here, and you're going to need a young guy to bring in under them. So they bring in a quarterback, or at least you thought that they would. The Giants did not draft Shedeur Sanders. I have no idea as to why the Giants didn't draft Shedeur Sanders, and they ended up not drafting a quarterback with their first pick. They drafted Abdul Carter from Penn State. And after drafting Abdul Carter, they then traded back into the first round. And I think at the 25th pick, they selected Jackson somebody. I can't remember Jackson's last name, from Ole Miss, as their quarterback. So he will inevitably be the future quarterback after Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston leaves. Jackson Dart, that's his name, D-A-R-T. So it led me to think, like, well, why did the Giants not take him? And again, that's my favorite team. And I was hopeful that they would, because I like Shedeur. There may have been some circumstances where Deion and Shedeur may have overplayed their hand. I'm not saying that because I know anything, because I don't, right? But there's been rumors and there's been accusations, and none of this has been proven. Until the New York Giants head football coach comes out and says this, we don't know anything to be true. But I do know that the Giants had a private workout after Shedeur's pro workout, is pro day per se for the teams. I do know that the Giants had a contingency of officials go to Colorado to work Shedeur out again. And I'm pretty sure in that, just based off the history that I know, that there was a what they call an install, where basically they send you a part of their playbook. Some of the information that they send you is purposely wrong, and it's for the quarterback to study it, and then, kind of you get tested on it to see what was wrong, what was right, so forth and so on. And I do know that the Giants did that, right? I don't know anything else beyond that. So we're hearing rumblings now that in the install that was sent, basically the playbook, that Shedeur failed at it and he didn't do well at it. And subsequently, this kind of ticked the Giants off like, okay, man, we sent you the playbook and you didn't even study it, or you don't know what it is that we're doing, and you got frustrated and we're frustrated because you can't figure it out. We'll just move on. And that could have, it sounds plausible. But now, again, I don't know that to be true, because the Giants could be, at this point, doing whatever they can to cover themselves for not drafting Shedeur Sanders, because Shedeur Sanders not being drafted in the first round became the story of the draft. There are people who watched the draft that can't tell you 10 people who got drafted that day, but they can tell you the story of the draft was Shedeur Sanders not being selected in the first round. And so, I saw in some mock draft that they didn't have him, the Giants didn't have him at 3, and that they were expecting him to fall possibly as far as number 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, after the Giants didn't select him, the slide happens, and pick after pick after pick. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these teams that are picking don't need a quarterback, so he's going to fall, right? You're only going to fall to a team that needs a quarterback. I was surprised that the Las Vegas Raiders didn't take him, because they are in need of a young quarterback. They just signed Geno Smith to be their veteran, but who better else than to draft than Shedeur Sanders to come in and study under the tutelage of Geno Smith? Didn't happen. He falls down to the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 21. The Steelers don't draft a quarterback at this point. And so it's a head scratcher, because now the first round ends and the Giants draft, like I said, they go back into the first round to take a pick, and it's not Shedeur Sanders. And so on TV, this is playing out, and everybody's scratching their head. Mel Kiper Jr., for what it's worth. I don't know what Mel Kiper Jr. does in his lifetime outside of this NFL draft stuff, but he was going ballistic on TV because he had predicted that Shedeur would be first. And Mel, being who he is, Mel was not happy with the fact that now you're probably messing up his business, because now he looks idiotic. So long story short, Shedeur falls to the 5th round. So, well, actually, let me go back. They get to the 3rd round, and the Cleveland Browns, who have the 94th pick, then select a quarterback, Dillon Gabriel from Oregon. And at this point, we're really scratching our heads like, why is Shedeur falling? Because now, not only did he not get drafted in the first round, which was Thursday, then they had the 2nd and 3rd round, which was Friday. Now it's into Saturday, which is the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds. There's only 7 rounds in the NFL draft, excuse me. And so now it's like, wow, is this kid even going to get drafted? And so the Cleveland Browns drafted Dillon Gabriel, a quarterback that I think is not as good as Shedeur Sanders, right? And then with the 144th pick in the 5th round, they then select Shedeur Sanders. Now, it's not commonplace for a team to draft 2 quarterbacks in the same draft. See RG3 and Kirk Cousins a few years back by the Washington then Redskins. So it's not uncommon. It's not like it's never happened. It's rare, though. I will say that much, because normally if you draft a guy, then you're expecting this guy to play for you, right? So that doesn't happen. And so we're left to ponder as to why. Now, there were rumors, there was quotes over the college football season. Deion said, hey, well, we're only going to a couple of teams. We're only going to do this. And he spoke in saying we as in Shedeur. That probably was a little problematic for some teams because nobody has a following like Coach Prime. And if you're an organization, if you draft this kid and he's not playing, all it would take would be for Coach Prime to send out a tweet saying, hey, why is my kid not playing? And now you've created a firestorm and you're answering questions and you're, quote unquote, a distraction. I wish I had time to talk about how people use that word in sports, and it's way overblown, but that's another story for another day. So Coach Prime, did have some quotes that he thought that, Shedeur would be, long gone before some of the teams even drafted. And from what we've been told, and again, take this for what it's worth, Shedeur Sanders was viewed as a bad interview. Like, he had a couple of good interviews with a couple of teams, but there were at least 10 teams that said, like, his interviews weren't good. And here's the thing. Then we got another rumor saying that Shedeur Sanders only interviewed with 7 teams. So now somebody's lying here. Like, if he interviewed with 7 teams, you can't, like, the word I heard was 10 teams. He interviewed with 10 teams, and then they said it was 7 teams. Well, it's like a job interview. Like, you're not going to get a job that you don't interview for. So if there are 32 teams in the league and he only interviews with 10, then, he's not going to get the job. No, all they have is film. And I think part of the issue is that with the NFL in particular, what they'll look at, they will forget the 4 years that you put on film. And they will concentrate on what you did in shorts and skins against the air. You know what I'm saying? They'll concentrate on just a little bit of stuff. Here's where I think Shedeur and Deion may have gone wrong. Or may have, I don't want to say wrong because it's not wrong. They may have handled things differently. When it came time for Deion to work out for the pro scouts when he was coming out of college, I think he ran the 40-yard dash. And he ran the 40-yard dash in like 4.2 seconds. So there was no need for him to lift any weights. There was no need for him to do any testing. There probably wasn't any need for him to do any interviews because the teams that would have requested that, Deion would have been off the board by the time they would have drafted. I think Deion went 4th to the Falcons, I think, without looking it up. So, he was coming off the board quick. So it wasn't like, Deion Sanders was a can't miss kid coming out of college. Shedeur, while he's Deion's son, isn't the same. And maybe, just maybe, Deion handled Shedeur and Shedeur handled himself like he was Deion. And he's not. And that's okay. Because I don't think for a second that anybody that is watching LeBron James Jr. play basketball think that he's as good as his dad. Or maybe he'll be as good as his dad. Because let me let you in on a little secret. Ain't too many as good as his dad. Regardless of where you place LeBron on your all-time list, LeBron James is one of the greatest basketball players we've ever seen. That's not an opinion. That is a fact. Where you put him on the list, I don't care. Where you put him on your list, I don't care. Where I put him on my list, doesn't matter. The same goes for Deion Sanders. He's one of the greatest football players, period, on either side of the football. So if I say Deion Sanders is top 5, you're not going to say that about Shedeur Sanders. I don't think, and definitely not coming out of college. And there's no knock, but that's just where he is. And I think it may be a situation where Shedeur handled himself as if he was his dad, and his dad allowed his son to handle himself as he was himself. And that's not the case. Rumor has it that, not rumors, Shedeur did not participate in some of the post activities after his bowl game, like the Senior Bowl or some combine. He didn't throw at the combine, the NFL combine. He didn't participate in the Senior Bowl. All of these things are where you get judged on your individual skill. And from what I understand, Shedeur's camp basically said, well, hey, you guys got 4 years of tape to watch. If you want to see how good he is. And he is good on tape. I mean, like, it's not like this kid is a charity case. This kid can play. I mean, like, I watch a lot of NFL football. I've watched the NFL all my life. Is he like the greatest quarterback I've ever seen? No. But I'll be honest. I saw Patrick Mahomes in college. He didn't impress me like that. He was good, but he wasn't great. I saw Tom Brady. When I saw Tom Brady at Michigan, he was bad. Like, there's nobody that would have told me that the guy that I saw at Michigan would go on to be the guy that he became to be. So no, I mean, like, it just happens. You develop over time. Your work ethic and the things that you do, some of it has to deal with the team that you go to and how they use your talents. So could it be that Deion carried this and played this like Shedeur was Deion? And maybe, just maybe, Shedeur played this like he was Deion, and he's not. And as a father, I don't necessarily know, if he handled it wrong. I stopped to say the word wrong because you're going to handle your kids the best way you know how. You're going to handle your kids based on how they are as people. I have 3 sons, 3 different people. I mean, how I handle them is pretty much the same, but I also have to handle them differently because they're 3 different people. I can't handle them all the same, especially when it comes to sports. So, no, where the father was a can't-miss prospect, the son isn't. The son is a very good prospect that I think will be a very good pro as time goes on. But no, he's not. He's not his dad. And maybe, just maybe, they carried it like that. And that could have been a reason why he fell in the draft. Again, regardless of how it was played out, I think he's still a first-round pick. Now, for him to be drafted behind a guy that he put up better numbers than, that makes no sense to me. Because now I'm looking at Cleveland sideways. Like, well, why'd you draft him? You had the 94th pick, and at the 94th pick, you decided, okay, we need a quarterback, right? So if you needed a quarterback at the 94th pick, why take Dillon Gabriel and not Shedeur Sanders? Only to take Shedeur Sanders 50 picks later. That makes no sense to me. So I would want to know from the Cleveland Browns, like, what is the expectation here? Because not only that, but they acquired a free agent quarterback, Kenny Pickett from the, I think, Eagles. So if you look at Cleveland's roster, when they start training camp in a couple of months, it's going to be Deshaun Watson, who is coming back from an Achilles tear. We probably won't see Deshaun Watson this year. And Deshaun Watson has a guaranteed contract, so he's on the books. So they're not going to cut him. You can't, right? So you got him. You got Joe Flacco, who is like 2 years younger than me. Joe Flacco's got to be like 50 years old. He's there. He's the insurance backup, right? Then you got Kenny Pickett, a guy that you brought over as a free agent, and then you just signed 2 more quarterbacks. Now that's 5 quarterbacks. Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur complete the 5. So most teams on a week-to-week basis only going to carry 3 quarterbacks on their roster. You'll probably have Deshaun Watson on the injured reserve list. So you got 4 guys competing for 3 spots. Somebody's going to be odd man left out. It might be Shedeur Sanders. I doubt it, but it might be. But if it's on talent, if he can grasp their offense and play, Shedeur Sanders is going to make this team. And I think if he's as good as I think that he can be, at some point, Shedeur Sanders will start for the Cleveland Browns. It may not be next year, but he will. I think he's that good. But I'm just wondering, like, when we saw Shedeur throughout this whole process, Did we see Shedeur or did we see Deion? Because I think there's a huge contingent of people that saw Deion Sanders. And they saw his baby boy being mistreated, if you will. And I saw even people saying, oh, well, he deserved to be in the first round. You don't deserve anything. You get what you earn. And so while I make the case that he should have been a first round pick, there were 32 teams that said, no, we're not doing this. And if he skipped out on pre-draft interviews, then, what else do you expect to happen? Again, Deion didn't have to interview with a bunch of teams because he knew at the very least by the third or fourth pick, he would have been drafted by then. So he didn't have to do all the workouts. He didn't have to go to the Senior Bowl. He didn't have to do all of these things. As an NFL prospect, you do, no matter who you are. Cam Ward had to do some of those things. Shedeur, maybe he overplayed his hand, but he probably should have done some of those things. Ultimately, I want what's best for this kid. I think he's a talent, and I think when given the right opportunity, he's going to flourish. Some of the words that I heard thrown out about him, he was arrogant, he was cocky. Let me tell y'all something about those two words, arrogant and cocky. There's not one football player that's ever stepped on a football field that's never been arrogant or cocky. Your starting right guard thinks that he's the best right guard ever. Your 5'6", 155-pound receiver thought that he was the best at South Carolina State, even though he wasn't. But I thought that. Yeah, throw me the ball. I'm open every play. I was. At least in my mind, I was. Here's the reality, though. Confidence, arrogance, cockiness, you can call it what you want. Even the most bum quarterback is confident in his ability. That's a given. It comes with the sport. It comes with the territory. Everybody thinks that they can do it. Everybody knows that they can do it. And Shedeur Sanders is no different. And he just so happens to be the son of the most electrifying and charismatic players that we've ever seen. And Deion once said, and I quote, I wear my confidence like cologne. And he said, I don't care if my confidence offends you. And I think Shedeur's kind of played that the same way. Now, again, is it Deion or is it Shedeur? And I think some people viewed Shedeur's slide as a knock on, let's show Deion, let's stick it to Deion. Is that possible? It's possible. But Deion was able to control Shedeur's situation probably since he was 7 or 8 years old, probably since the first time he picked up a football. And this will be, for what it's worth, the first time that Shedeur will play football and look on the sidelines and won't see his father. I don't necessarily know that that's a knock, but I heard some people talking about oh, you just don't know how it's going to go. Here's the thing. If you're a coachable football player, you're a coachable football player. Period. One of the things that I prided myself in at Wilson High School in Florence, South Carolina, at South Carolina State University as a football player, being coached, being able to take criticism, being able to take praise, because you will get that. You'll probably get more criticism than you get praise, but you got to be able to handle both. And I think one of the things that I've learned is that Shedeur Sanders really and truly has a lot of traits that his father has, but he's not his father. And I think we've kind of conflicted the two. And I think in watching him fall from grace, if you will, from the first round projections to the fifth round, it's very disappointing. And it's disheartening because particularly if you root for the kid, you wanted to see him go someplace and ball. And the thing is that if you don't go in the first round and you don't go in the second round, you're pretty much a project after that. And teams have, ideas as to where they're going to place you. And I use the Cowboys' current quarterback as an example, Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott, as many of you know, was drafted in the 4th round coming out of Mississippi State. Dak Prescott he had a really good senior year, and I think at one point in time, Mississippi State was in the top 3 in the country, right? But Dak Prescott, his numbers look good, and he was a good player, but he got into some brawl at spring break. He caught a DUI. And so, there was some negative stuff floating around him right around the draft time. And so, subsequently, Dak Prescott falls from, I think maybe he was like a projected second round pick, falls to the 4th round. You can either be upset about where you are, or you can come in and say, hey, I'm going to do what I can. And when my time gets called, I get an opportunity to produce, I will. Because Dak Prescott, I'm sure, entered the Cowboys camp very low in the depth charts. While he was expected to make the team, he was very low on the depth chart. And he worked his way up to the second team. Well, guess what happened? Somewhere during his rookie year, the starting quarterback, Tony Romo, gets hurt. He gets hit in the back. He gets a hurt back. And Dak Prescott is ready to come in. And he comes in and he takes over for Tony Romo, and the rest is history. And Dak Prescott, at the time of this recording, is the highest paid NFL player, making, I think, $60 million this year. He was a guy who waited on his opportunity. And when his opportunity came, because opportunity is not going to knock, you just better be ready for it. And so, in conclusion, I think, as for Shedeur, the thing I would tell him is just be prepared. Be prepared. Don't worry about the haters. Don't worry about the naysayers. You now have to carve a path for yourself. The Sanders name is what you have, but you're not at Colorado anymore. The Sanders name means something. It means a whole lot more in Colorado than it does in Cleveland. Now you want to be great. Now you need to go show and prove, not so much to everybody else, but prove to yourself just how good you can be. And there should be some motivation. You don't have to speak on it, but Tom Brady mentions this all the time. He knew, and he probably to this day can tell you, every single quarterback that got drafted before him. And I'm sure in Tom Brady's mind, he probably thought he was a 1st round pick. The reality is he wasn't. Again, I saw him at Michigan. He wasn't impressive at all. But he worked. And he was prepared, and, kind of like the same thing. He actually almost didn't make the team his first year. And then he makes the team, the starting quarterback gets hurt, and the rest is history, Jack. The same can happen for Shedeur. But you have to be prepared, and you have to understand that you're not your father, you're your father's child, and that's okay. But it's time to make your imprint on who Shedeur Sanders is. You want to be Shedeur Sanders. You want to be known as Shedeur Sanders, not Deion's son. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I want to thank you all for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We drop new episodes every Thursday and every Sunday at midnight. Also, check out our sister podcast. It is a new baby. It is called the Rap Soul Podcast. It is a music podcast where we discuss music and artists from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s when it comes to rap, hip hop, soul, and R&B. It is the best music podcast that you've never heard. So check it out. We drop those new episodes on every Monday. If you're on Cash App, hit us up on Cash App. If you'd like to contribute financially to the show, $ TWELVEKYLE. We also have a merchandise line. Just click the link in the description box. You can buy 12 Kyle Podcast t-shirts, hoodies, as well as coffee mugs. We got it for the low. You can follow us on social media at 12 Kyle, at 12 Kyle Podcast across the board. Again, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy 12 Kyle. We'll catch you guys next time. 5,000. Cheers.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle Podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle Podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.